Well, we start now in a short series. I think it's just 2 videos from chapter 10. Yeah, 2 videos as I check my notes. 2 videos related to our internal candidates. We spent a while in chapter 9 talking about our external candidates. In fact, a couple of chapters really assume that we're going to have to go outside the organization to get candidates for our jobs. But this chapter says that there are oftentimes the circumstances where the people we want in these roles are already in our organization and we just got to move them from one seat or one desk to another. So this particular video, chapter 10A video, is going to focus on internal candidates, and it's really going to look at why we would use internal candidates instead of external candidates. And it'll start with an overarching idea of what we do to assess the internal folks. In a nutshell, what we mean by external assessment is the way that we go about, or the process that we use to evaluate the current employees in terms of training that they might need, reassignment to new jobs that they might need, promotion that they may be due or qualified for, or dismissal purposes if they're not able to do the thing that we ask them to do and we don't see another role that they could play here. So internal assessment is an ongoing process where we look at somebody and make some decisions about what happens next. We may be training you, we may be reassigning you, we may be promoting you, we may be ushering you out the door. But the idea here is that you are in a role now that you either do well or don't do well or whatever, but there are potentially other roles that you could do and maybe do really, really well. So we assess your ability to do something else for your growth, for our mutual benefit, and we look at other jobs that you could potentially be doing. A, because most people don't want to do the same thing forever and ever, and B, because we might not really need you to do that job. When you get good at that job and you build skills, we might see that you're more valuable in a different role, and we can bring somebody into your role who doesn't have some of the skills that you have. So doing this internal assessment and looking at our candidates and finding out where they could fit in other jobs gives us the opportunity to expand your career potential. It gives us the opportunity to say, you can grow with us, you can be promoted with us, you can make more money with us and have more responsibility with us and get better benefits or whatever. But it also, if there's not an opportunity for you to be promoted, you're good at what you do, but it just doesn't seem like you're ever going to get to the next level where you could manage, and you don't want to do this much longer, we could move you sideways somehow into a different role. And I remember especially emphasizing the idea that no matter how good you are at your job, there are times when this is basically what you're capable of doing. And just because you're great at it doesn't mean that you can move up to the next level. I remember when I worked at ADP, Automatic Data Processing, before I moved to Americas back in 1999, I'd worked with them for about 10 years. And in the 5 and 6 year range, I was having conversations. I was in a customer service team that dealt with payroll clerks around the Southeast through phone calls. And the payroll clerks, when they needed help, would call us. I had my assigned client base, so they had an 800 number that came straight to me. And when they needed something, they'd call me. And we would talk on the phone about how do you fix this, or how do you do that, or what's the goal here? You need this report or that report or whatever. And I got to where I was really good at that role. I mean, I take pride in the fact that when you give me something to do, I'm going to do the very best that I can at it, and I'm going to succeed. And if I have an option of saying yes or no to something, and I don't think that I'm going to be able to do well at it, I'm going to say no. In some regards, that's bad because I don't challenge myself to improve, but in some regards, that's good because I make sure that I give 100% at everything that I do. But in this particular job, I had kind of moved to the point where I was really at the top of what I was allowed to do in that job role, in that job title. And so I was in this customer service role within a team, and I had a manager who reported to the vice president of customer service. And every year at appraisal time, I would meet with my manager, but I'd also meet with the vice president, who not only was my vice president, but he was a friend of mine from church. And every year, I remember still, I mean, that's been 25 years ago, but I still, gosh, that just seems so odd to say that. That was 25 years ago. Some of you aren't even 25 years old. But I can remember very distinctly, at least 2 years in a row where I'd go into my meeting with Sam, and we would talk, the vice president, we would talk about what I'd do next. And he'd say, well, what do you want to do? You're really good at this customer service thing. What do you want to do? And I'd say, I want to be a manager. There's 3 customer service teams, so there's 3 managers, but there's other managers in other departments. I want to be a manager of a customer service team. And occasionally, one of those managers would leave or get reassigned or something else, and there'd be an opening, and I'd apply for it. And I remember the first time that I applied for one, I thought I was really qualified, and I interviewed, and I thought I did really well. And they gave the job to Tony. And I thought, oh, that's disappointing, but I can understand giving the job to Tony because he and I were parallel. We were at the same level in the customer service jobs that we were doing. But he was great. I mean, he really was. I was really good, but he was better than I was. And I could say, yeah, if he hadn't applied, I might have gotten the job. But because he did, I would agree that he's the better candidate. I'm just going to work a little harder, and I'm going to get the next one. So Tony took that role, and he became my boss for a little while. And then another one of the positions opened up, and they needed to hire somebody, and I applied for that one too. And I interviewed. I thought I did real well. I thought I had all the background and all of the boxes checked off that made me a great candidate. But when the time came to name the person who was to take that position, it was Lisa. And I thought, really? At first it was Tony, now it is Lisa. I can agree with you that Tony was a really good pick, but man, I'm at least as good as Lisa is. And it was a 50-50 toss-up. Maybe you picked her because she's a girl and I'm a guy. But I think that I'm legitimately capable of this job. And so I went in and I talked with my boss, with Sam, and I said, Sam, what's going on here? I mean, you keep asking me what I want to do. I keep saying that I want to be a manager, but twice now when a manager's job has come open and I've applied for it, I've been overlooked. What's going on? And both times I remember so clearly. I can picture him sitting at his desk right now at the table in his office, looking across the table at me, almost a little uncomfortable because we're friends, go to the same church and everything. And he says, Mark, you just don't think like a manager. And I was like, well, how in the heck do I think like a manager if I never get put in the role of a manager? And so this kind of fits in, this story kind of fits into me with this slide, because in this particular situation, I'm at item number 3 here on this slide. There were some blocks related to me. I was not going to get promoted. It became really evident after 2 misses that I was not going to get promoted into a manager's role in the customer service department. So to the degree that Sam and the other managers wanted to keep me at ADP, they had to find alternatives. So the assessment part, well, Mark, you're good at this, you're really good at that, you have these skills, you've got these weaknesses, and we don't see a way to improve these weaknesses to get the job that you want. But we can see that based upon your strengths and your skills and your past and your experience and all this kind of stuff, there are some other things we could think about doing. Now, you've always asked us about managing a customer service team, but there may be options to manage other areas of the business. And what happened in my circumstances is that there came a point in time where they said, you're really good working with these reports and programming these things, and typically each of the customer service people had to write their own reports in between phone calls for their customers, programming language and whatnot. And they said, you know what, that's taken too much time away from the other reps. We need somebody who does nothing but write reports. And Mark is really good at that stuff, to write reports. So they created a job for me that didn't exist before, called a management report specialist. And I had my own little cubicle off to the side where I wouldn't be bothered. And everybody who needed a report filled out the paperwork and put it in the basket. And I would just every single day, all day long, write the code that would do these reports. And I'd give it back to him as soon as it was done. And we'd try to turn these reports around in short order. So there was this additional path for me to grow, because I couldn't be promoted. But eventually, after a year or 2 of that kind of got boring, and I still had that dream of managing. So they decided, you know what, it's not enough to have one person doing these reports. We need a team that does these reports, because we didn't realize how many reports there are. And Mark is struggling to keep up with the workload. As good as he is, he needs somebody else to help him. So we're going to create this role of a department that does nothing but programming. And we're going to have Mark manage those people. So I became a manager in a different context than what I had in my mind. And it was because they did a very good job at ADP of internal assessment, of knowing what I wanted, helping me to get there. When they saw that there wasn't a real clear path to what I wanted to do, they looked at ways to create optional paths or additional paths. And at first, they transferred me from a customer service role into a programming role. And when I excelled at that programming role, then they created a path for promotion in a different context. And not only did I get the opportunity to manage some employees, but I got to hire those employees. And most managers don't really get a big input into that. I got to create the department, I got to visualize the department, I got to come up with the different roles that I wanted in that department, and then I got to interview and hire people to fill those roles and then manage them. So that was really important to me. So that's a big overview of why we might use internal candidates to promote them, to transfer them, to reassign them, whatever. But we want to spend in a lesson that you've already seen as you looked at the PowerPoint, only has 4 slides, one of which is the title. The last 2 slides we spend a significant amount of time on talking about why that's a good idea and why that's a bad idea to use people who already work here instead of going outside and getting somebody new. First of all, let's look at the benefits of internal candidates. If I've already been working here, I know the culture. When I first came in as a new employee, I didn't know anything about your culture, but I've learned it over the course of time. I know how we do lunch breaks, and I know how we prioritize our workload. I know how we recognize folks who do well. I kind of know what we do when folks aren't living up to expectation. I know how the customer plays a role in our success. I know how departments interact with each other. So if I'm already here, especially if I've been here for any significant amount of time, if I've been here for a couple of years or whatever, I know the culture very well. Anybody who doesn't already work here not only has to learn potentially how to do this job, but they have to learn the culture. And the person-organization fit is all about the culture. We know that you're going to have good person-organization fit because you've been here and you've been demonstrating that you understand the culture and you know it. So one benefit of using somebody who already works here is that they already know the culture. Another benefit is that it is usually less costly. When you think about the process of bringing in somebody from outside, you got to post an ad somewhere and you may pay a fee for that ad. You might have to pay a fee to a headhunter or to a search agency or whatnot. You at least have to pay in terms of the time of the people who are interviewing them. You may have to pay them mileage to come and interview or to fly down here for an interview and whatnot. If I'm already working for you and I'm sitting in a cubicle on the 2nd floor and I've got to go up to the 3rd floor to interview with somebody, it can be very, very inexpensive because I don't have to pay you to come to work. I don't have to pay you for your mileage, any of that kind of stuff. So it's much, much less costly. Certainly there aren't any headhunters or search firms or things like that that factor into this that make it much more expensive. Another benefit is that and as was the case with my personal example at ADP, when they promoted Tony, up until that point in time, I'm like, is there any hope here? Do people have the option of moving out of here? And I'd seen people move out of customer service into a role called a district manager where they went out to new clients and installed the software and did their initial training. And I was like, well, I know there's a path from customer service to that. There's a path from customer service to sales, but do I not want to do those things or not? Is there an opportunity? Does it ever happen that people get promoted from within? And when I see a job come open and I see Tony get promoted, I go, there's a possibility. It wasn't me this time, but it does happen. So that means, if I stay here another year, it might be my turn. So it improves the morale to see people promoted and get rewarded. Another benefit of an internal candidate is that we already know them. They know us and we know them. If I'm the manager looking at who to put in this position and I'm looking at you as an option, you work here already. If you work for me, I know you really well. If you work for somebody else, I can find out about you very easily, but somebody knows your work ethic and they know your skills and your talents and your abilities and your knowledge and all that kind of stuff. And so we know you. If somebody who's coming in from the outside, we're kind of guessing. Do you know this? Do you not know this? You say you know this, but do you really know this? Somebody who works for us, we have documentation, performance appraisals, and things like that really clearly demonstrate and provide evidence that you know how to do this thing. The next thing that is a benefit to an internal promotion or transfer is that just like it's less costly, it's quicker. I don't really have to spend a lot of time finding you and searching for you, sourcing you, recruiting you, whatnot. You're already here. So I just have to carve 30 minutes to an hour out of my day to interview you. And it's a whole lot quicker. And related to that, improving the morale in the story with me and with Tony and with Lisa, when I move you around the organization and continue to give you opportunities to help you grow, I'm managing your career and I'm helping you manage your career, and we're thinking more long term, and we're thinking more about improving the value of our employees. And ultimately, we want to have a bunch of employees who are extremely valuable because they know a lot of stuff and they can do a lot of things. So using my internal candidates means that I continue to grow my employees and I give them hope. And the last benefit that we have on this slide, certainly there are other benefits, but the last benefit is that if you've worked for me for 2 years and then I find a way to promote you, now I've had you for 4 years or 5 years. If you've worked for me for 3 years and you're kind of getting burnt out and you're thinking about leaving, but I shift you over into another position, now there's a fresh breath of air, or there's a new level of hope, or there's some new challenge, and you work for a couple of years. So in either case, I've taken an employee that I've had for 2 years and I've ended up keeping them for 5. So it increases the tenure that you have with our organization, or your length of service, or your number of years of experience. And that's always important because it's tough to train somebody new. It's tough to get somebody up to full functioning capability very quickly. So the longer I can keep people, the more benefits I can get from them. In an ideal world, we would hire you out of college, perhaps, or hire you in high school, and we'd keep you for 30 years, and then you'd leave and somebody would come in behind you. That's not the real world today, but the closer we can get to that, the better we both really arguably are. You don't have to keep looking for new things. You've got opportunities, you've got growth, you've got salary, you've got all those kinds of things. And we've got people that are growing with us and learning with us. So there's a lot of benefits to using internal candidates, but there are some drawbacks to using internal candidates as well. And one of the biggest ones is that we don't have a lot of diversity. Now, eventually, if there's an opening at the bottom, or let's say there's an opening in the second level of our organization, and we take somebody from the first level and move them to the second level, we got to hire somebody for the first level. If there's an opening at a VP level, we might move up a department manager, but now we've got to fill a department manager. So we move up a job supervisor. Well, now we've got an open job supervisor. So we move up an entry-level worker. Well, now we've got an entry-level worker. And it may very well be that we don't have a whole lot of diversity because we're using people we've already got. Another drawback is that as I move from a customer service representative position into a programming position, I knew the role of customer service very well, but I don't know the role of programming. So you need to train me on programming. If we bring somebody in from the outside, they may know how to program. We've got to train them on our culture, but not on the job. Somebody who's already with us knows the culture but doesn't know the job. So it's a different kind of training. And we might argue that it's more expensive to train you on how to do the job than it is to train you on what the culture is, because you learn the culture over the course of time. But if you don't really know how to do this job, you may not be efficient for a long time. So where we don't have to teach you the culture or how we do things or our processes or procedures, we do have to teach you how to do this particular job. And it may be a tough process depending on how well you learn, how quickly you learn, how much you want to learn. Just like it is on the next item here on the drawbacks, just like it is encouraging to people to see folks get promoted, if you're kind of observing, it's not my turn to be promoted. I didn't apply for that job. I saw Tony get promoted. It wasn't a him or me kind of thing. I'm so excited for Tony, and that means that I can be promoted. It can be a very, very big drawback or a very big discouragement if you're Mark and you applied for the job and Tony got it, because it might damage Mark's morale. And it did, as I told you in my example, twice somebody was promoted and it wasn't me. For some people, Tony got promoted, and for some people, not me got promoted. From where I sat, having applied for the job, who got hired? Not me. Doesn't matter who it was, fill in the blank, Tony, Lisa, whomever. It's not me. And so after that happens a couple of times, I start to get real discouraged because it's never me. And if we rely too much on hiring or promoting internal candidates, those who really want to be promoted that get passed over for very legitimate reasons can become very, very discouraged and have very big morale problems when they're consistently, repeatedly not given the opportunity that they think that they're ready for, but you think they're not ready for. Another drawback of using internal candidates, especially in terms of promotions, you were one of the accountants and now you're the manager of accounting, or you were in the warehouse and now you're managing the warehouse. The problem can be that while you were in the warehouse, you became buddies with everybody and you joked and you kidded around and you challenged each other on how little can we do today, or whatever, and you didn't think about it from the perspective of discipline. Now you're the manager. Not only do you have to do all this administrative stuff with the reports and the meetings and things like that, but you've also got to establish some set of parameters in terms of what's okay and what's not okay, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And when somebody does something that's not okay or not acceptable, you got to go in and you got to have a conversation with them and you got to get onto them and you got to discipline them and you might have to fire them. And it may very well be that while we were all colleagues, we were great, but now you're the boss and you're mean and you're just picking on me all the time. And it can be very, very difficult to supervise your friends. So sometimes, even if you are very well qualified to move up from your position to the manager of your position, we don't let that happen because it can be very, very difficult to manage the people that are being left behind. So what we might do as a general rule in a lot of organizations is to say, we're willing to promote you, but it's not going to be a straight up and down promotion. We're going to be promoting you to something laterally. So where you were a really darn good accountant, we're going to promote you into something that's not accounting, or a different piece of accounting that you're not supervising the people that you used to work with. You're not supervising the person who's hired to replace you. You're supervising other people. And so I'm one of 8 accounts receivable clerks. I'm not getting promoted to the director of accounts receivable because I'm supervising the people that used to be my buddies. I'm going to be promoted to the director or the manager of the accounts payable clerks. Similar stuff. I knew them, but it's not the same relationship, and I'm not supervising my friends like I would be if it was a straight up and down promotion. Hope that makes sense. Another drawback is that new ideas are not brought in, at least at the level that we need to. We need fresh ideas at the VP level. But if we promote a director to a VP and promote a supervisor to a director, and we promote a worker to a supervisor, and we hire a worker, all those new ideas are at the worker level, not the VP level. So where we need those ideas, we've got the same old ideas we've always had because we've got somebody that's been thinking the same way we've always thought. So sometimes it makes sense, even though if we've got really qualified people that we could promote internally, it makes sense at higher levels to go outside and bring somebody in because they bring in new ideas. And then the last thing that's on this slide, and again, just like with the advantages or the benefits, there are a lot more that we could talk about that we don't. There are a lot more drawbacks we could talk about that we don't in this video. But the last one we do talk about is that there could be favoritism or the perception of favoritism. It could have been very easy for me to say in those situations with Tony and Lisa, well, you know what, you promoted Lisa because she's your favorite. She's the one that's always happy. And I wasn't always happy, but I did a darn good job. We would argue that I was here earlier and I stayed here later, and I had more clients and I had more demanding clients. And because of that, I was focused on my job. And Lisa was just very happy-go-lucky, and she had a pretty easy client base, and she did a pretty good job with it. But because they weren't as demanding, she was able to move around and talk to people, and she was in your office at least twice a week, just chit-chatting. How's the wife? How are the kids? How was the fishing trip? And I never do that because I was too much busy. I was way too overloaded compared to what she did, and she became your favorite because she was in your office from time to time, and she brought you cookies every once in a while, and she went to the same church that you did, or whatever the case may be. And it could very well seem to me that you just promoted your favorite, not because she was the most qualified or because she had the best outcomes for potential success, but because she was your favorite somehow. And it can appear that way. We got to be careful as we're promoting people and moving people that we are able to very, very quickly and very, very legitimately, clearly describe the process that we used, that it was a logical process, it was a legitimate process, it didn't involve the heart or the feelings or the emotions or whatever, but it's strictly number-based and fact-based. And there's no favoritism here. It's just a matter of saying who is the best qualified, who can give us the best chance at success. So that's the summary of 10A. We're going to move to 10B here in a little bit in the next video. And we're going to talk about things that we can do to assess our internal candidates. There's a little bit of overlap from prior chapters. We talked a long time about things we can do to assess the external candidates, and there's even a little bit of overlap there. But we're going to focus at least one more of our lecture sessions on our internal candidates and what we can do to really assess them and find out when they're ready and what they're ready for. So we'll turn it off for now, and we will pick back up in another video with another little chunk of our textbook as you become closer and closer, move closer and closer to the point where you are great HR people or great managers in terms of spotting talent, building talent, recognizing talent, and staffing your organizations in a way that you have no choice but to succeed. Hopefully that's what happens, and hopefully that's that's the feeling that you have going through this. I'm getting closer and closer to a point where I'm going to be an outstanding manager in terms of how I interact with my people. That's what our goal is. Hopefully we're getting there. And bye for now.